Welcome to StoryFest 2025 at the Westport Library. Please be sure to pick up a copy of our program to find details about all of today's panels and events.
Big panel. There's so many.
Tangled up in that.
Dead center. Yeah. Oh no. It's a good spot to be in. A laser dot just appears right in my forehead. Go. We'll balance it out. Hello. Yeah.
Hi, welcome everyone. The next panel is called Fiction Without Borders, Storytelling Beyond Limits. My name is Heather Frimmer. I'm a local author and a radiologist, and I write medical dramas. My most recent book is called Always Hope. And so I'm gonna start out by asking everyone on the panel, and we have a big panel here, to talk a little, to introduce themselves and just say a couple lines about their most recent book, like elevator pitch about your most recent book. Do you want to start, Gabi?
Yeah, hello, I'm Gabi Coatsworth, and my book is a field guide to library ghosts. It is feel-good fiction with a British accent and a stray ghost or two in it. It's the kind of book you read between book club books as a kind of palate cleanser. And it's about a ghost trapped in a portrait who's looking for his wife in the afterlife because he's mislaid her.
Hey, I'm Cadwell Turnbull. My book is A Ruin Great and Free. It's the third book in a series called The Convergence Saga. I often struggle to do an elevator pitch for the book, but I've come across this pretty simple one, and it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets The Wire. Right? It's monsters coming out to society, and it follows a group of characters as they try to adjust to this world where there are human supremacist groups, and they're advocating for their civil rights, and it's about their journey through this new, very radically changing world.
Cadwell's books are fantastic. Just to throw out there, that's a good pitch. I've never heard that one. Testing. Hi, my name is Martin Cahill, pronouns he, him. Thank you to StoryFest for having me. Thanks to all my fellow panelists. This is gonna be fun. The book with the big fox up there, Audition for the Fox, by me, Martin Cahill. It involves time travel, trickster gods, the debate of what is better, coffee versus tea, and yes, that is plot relevant. It's sort of like, what if Terry Pratchett got into an arm wrestling contest with Aesop, but it didn't matter because something was behind them stealing their wallets. And that's really the beginning of it.
Hi, I'm Joan Silber, and my book is Mercy. The premise of this book is, it takes place in the 70s, and two guys who are close friends and buddies are doing drugs together, and heroin drugs. And one of them overdoses, and the other takes him to the hospital and then abandons him, and everything spins out from that. But the mode that I work in, or have for the last 5 books or so, is something between a novel and stories that link up and mount together and become a whole, but are very separate and have separate tellers of them.
I'm Nalini. I wrote a novel. It's set in Bombay. It begins being set in Bombay. By the time we get to the end, the city has become Mumbai. So I'm interested in that transformation, but also in the transformation of a fishing village, one of the urban fishing villages there, and in kind of the neighborhood of a sort of a professional middle-class neighborhood that is very, very Catholic. So I'm interested in kind of the colonial history of that area too.
I'm Jordan Castro. I'm the author of the novel Muscle Man. I was thinking about, actually, I was on the elevator earlier, and there was this guy at the hotel I was thinking about elevator pitches. I'm like, this guy, he was barefoot, and it was just us on the elevator, and he was like, you know, the elevator next to this one is broken, I think. And I saw this fire truck come a few days ago, and I think they were here for the elevator, so don't go on the other elevator. And then he like got off and walked barefoot down the hallway. And then the elevator was totally fine. I used the other elevator later, and I was just thinking during all this, like, why he told me that.
Is that the idea for your next book?
No, but I'm grateful to be here.
Please let that be what Muscle Man is about. That's all I want.
So as you can tell, we have a varied panel, multiple different genres. So I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to talk about genre. And genre, I think, is an artificial construct, but it's also integral to the way publishing works and the way books are sold. So I'm wondering if each of you can talk about what genre you think you write in, what genre your publisher thinks you write in, and if there's a difference, I'm interested in that. Or you could just riff on genre in general. Does anyone dying to start?
I can go because my book doesn't really fit very conveniently into any particular genre. So it's considered to be partially women's fiction because the main character is a woman and she undergoes some changes and, you know, improves herself sort of throughout the book. On the other hand, it's also paranormal because there's a ghost in it, but it certainly isn't Twilight, and it's nothing scary. What else has it been called? Various things, which is why I describe it as feel-good fiction. And I got the idea from the Edinburgh Bookshop in Edinburgh, Scotland, a couple of weeks ago. They actually had a shelf called Feel-Good Fiction. And I said, why have you got? And they said, because people keep coming in and saying, I want something to make me feel good. And so there was a whole mixture of things there, including, you know, cozy mysteries and cozy stories about dogs and cats and stuff. So that was my genre. I'm sticking with it, no matter what anybody says.
I guess we could just go down the line again.
But I want people to jump in if something, you know, makes them think of another idea. I want it to be a conversation if we can.
Okay, I'll still go.
Do it, Cadwell, do it.
Okay. So I feel like the low-hanging fruit for mine is like urban fantasy or contemporary fantasy. I feel like that's what my publisher might think it is, and it was definitely my aim going into the series. Like I was like, I'm gonna write an urban fantasy series, but then I immediately just started breaking all the rules of that genre. I think that is what I do generally. I start off with a genre that I'm like, oh, I'm writing this kind of book, and then I just break all the rules for that genre, and then it's something else. I've had a reader describe it as quantum fantasy, because despite the fact that it's about like werewolves and vampires and witches and stuff like that, there's also quantum mechanics in there for some reason.
It's a new genre.
And then I sometimes describe it as like cosmic fantasy with like a dash of horror in there. That's very political. So yeah, there's just like a mix of stuff. There's also like a literary bent to it. So there's like characters, you know, baking bread, for example. Like a werewolf baking bread is a part of the plot, or like a dragon shifter, like learning how to make jam, right? So yeah, maybe. I mean, it's kind of scary sometimes, kind of funny sometimes, kind of weird, always weird. I'll stop talking now.
Go ahead.
No, please, we're supposed to jump in. Shot not. I don't know. I used to work in publicity and marketing in publishing, and so there's a part of me that knows genre is a fictional thing we made to sell books because it's very difficult to keep things very wishy-washy when you walk into a store and say, I want a romantic rocket ship love story horror, and but that's not how it works, unfortunately. So there's a reason why things are so delineated, because as you go down from publisher to bookseller to reader to whoever, it just makes things simpler because it's easier to categorize things, and humans love categorization. My genre is something. It's a little bit of everything. This book involves like I said, time travel and trickster gods. There's interstitial fable-like stories in between everything. There's humor. There's also grim, dark realities to it. I sort of have said, when people ask me what I write, I say, you know, fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and everything in between, because it is what it is. You know, I think you have to follow your heart towards whatever story you're telling. I think that writing towards a particular genre is only ever going to trap you within the confines of what you think that is. So you just need to, you can put yourself in the cage, but bring a key, because eventually you're gonna have to break out. Because,
I like that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people can get stuck by the ideas of what they think they should be doing or how they should be writing. And at the end of the day, my personal philosophy is publishing a book is a miracle, because there's so many ways it doesn't happen and can't or won't or maybe shouldn't, and yet you have to do it anyway, because if you're a writer, you know why you write, which is that you can't not write. And so for me, it's always a matter of like, swing for the fences, you know, like there's no point in watering down or confining yourself to a particular way of telling a story, because I wrote this book like it's gonna be the only book I write. So if you're gonna do it, put everything in there that you want and leave the marketing and genre to your publicist, who, if Casey, if you're listening, thank you.
Joan, I think you described it earlier. Your recent books really defy genre in a way, in that they're literary fiction novels, but sort of also short stories, but not really, something in between, right?
Yeah. I want to answer both of those. One is, nobody's going to put literary fiction on a book jacket. I mean, that genre. But that is certainly how I think of myself, and what my efforts are about that, even if the book is about, you know, sex and drugs and death. But I'm looking at it in my own way. But also, what is particular about the way I work is it's in between short stories and novels. And I've never come up with a word for the form. You know, that's just what I do. And I like that, because I always say, it's, my mother used to say, mother sounded more like this then, you're not the only pebble on the beach. Which meant don't be so selfish. But I want that sense of different inner voices emerging in the book. It's not just one person's story. So that's important to me. And I feel like I've done my best work in that form. It does something to me that helps me in getting all these slightly conflicting voices.
I think I don't think about genre at all when I'm writing, because actually I worked in music, and the you know, what you're saying about those constructs are the same, right? We need, you know, you need to be able to tell people what they are about to hear in some way, and so you make up some words for that. And we all know that if we were extra cool in bands, we would sort of get to move around into different kinds of music if we felt like it, even on a single album. And so I try not to think about it at all. It feels like somebody else's job to think about what the genre is. And it's enough to just pay attention to the work itself. Like, I find that absorbing enough that I don't have to think about how it might be categorized later. But the way that I think about it when I'm in the middle of it is really just as character-driven fiction, which is most fiction. And so I think, so that gives me a lot of range. That means I can look at almost anything I want to, and it can inform my process and help me with what I'm doing. And I think in terms of character-driven fiction, I'm drawn always to characters that seem to me possibly to have been overlooked in actual life. So in the novel, in The Unbroken Coast, I'm really interested in I'm interested in children, because I think often we don't really pay attention to what kids are thinking or feeling or experiencing. We spend a lot of time on them. We might possibly helicopter them, but are we actually engaging with them? I think about somebody suffering from memory loss, because it's really easy to discount that person in their narrative about their own lives. And I think about servants. I think about people who are sort of so struck by poverty that they will not rise to the world's attention. It seems to me that this is what writing could possibly do, is pay attention to those people. And so that's kind of the way I try to think about mine.
Yeah, I can relate with what people are saying about gender being sort of not gender, genre.
Gender
being,
too.
Now, gender is a construct, yeah.
Genre being sort of constricting and so on. I mean, but at the same time, I do feel like, a novel isn't just anything. It's like, there's a certain freedom, I think, in life and in fiction. Sort of freedom can really only be found in the proper constraints. And so, for me, they're like this novel, I was sort of playing with Gothic tropes. I was, it's funny, one of my favorite writers is Patricia Highsmith, who in America was always received as like a genre writer, a sort of crime writer, and in Europe was sort of thought of as this like psychological literary fiction writer. And I feel like sort of, and she would complain about that and stuff like that. I feel like in a weird way I'm the opposite, which is that like I deep down want to be like a thriller writer, but I can't stop writing literary fiction. And part of the reason is because another of my favorite novelists is Thomas Bernhard, and he in some random YouTube documentary about him, he says that invisible processes which nobody can see are the only interesting thing about literature at all. And in a weird way, for me, like I feel like I'm trying to sort of marry the kind of like thriller, high pressure, high stakes, page turnery quality with like this interiority that I think literature is uniquely good at capturing.
I have a comment to make about this too, and one of the things about genre that I think is why it's lasted so long is that writers and publishers don't want the readers to be disappointed. So they'll tend to give you a kind of general area to move around in. But it's why romance in particular is labeled romance, is because it's got to deliver a certain thing. And if it doesn't, you'll hear from your reader. What genre do you put yourself in?
So it depends who I'm talking to, what genre my books are in. So most often like book club fiction or upmarket fiction. But then if I'm talking to someone who's really interested in medicine or another doctor, then it's medical fiction. And it could be that a lot of my characters are Jewish, so it could be Jewish fiction, or it could be women's fiction. So it could fall into a lot of different buckets.
Yeah.
I did, my publisher, I didn't know about that, about genre and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, a Muscle Man, I tried to make it as thrilling as possible, like I said, and they were like, I was like, can we just call it a psychological thriller? And they were like, no,
Yeah.
because they will come after you
Right.
like you wouldn't believe. It takes place over the course of just like a few hours. It's really not a thriller in that way. But then they put metaphysical thriller, and they got away with it. So I don't know, I haven't looked at any of the Goodreads or anything like that, but yeah.
Yeah, because it is a sort of inherent promise to the reader.
Right.
If you're going to slap a label on there and say, this is bee-punk, bumblebee punk sci-fi, and there's no bumblebees in there, you're going to have one reader who's like, I was promised a hive of adventure, and I did not receive that. But, for all that it is a construct, it has a purpose, right? And it does help us to find readers and for readers to find you, but I do think that, yeah, sometimes it can certainly set up boundaries that are...
It can be limiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was great, thank you. I'm interested in idea generation. I struggle with this. I usually, when I'm writing a book, I don't have an idea for my next book, and then toward the end of writing the book, I'll have one idea for another book, but I'm not a writer who has like 1,000 ideas jotted down. So I'm interested in, one, do you have 1,000 ideas jotted down, or do you edit them before you write them down? And how do you get your ideas? Is it from media? Is it from experiences in your own life? Is it from your imagination, a combination of all of these things?
I studied with Grace Paley when I was an undergraduate, and can you guys hear me? I'll speak up. Okay. I studied with Grace Paley when I was an undergrad, and Grace always said that it took at least 2 ideas to make a story. And I think that's very true for me, that one idea seems a little lame and it doesn't have enough going on, and another idea rubbed against it, sort of, the two help crack each other open. So that's been important.
I love that.
I worked with Grace Paley briefly, really briefly, which was so formative, really one of the best things I think that happened to me. And she has an essay called The Value of Not Understanding Everything. So that has been hugely useful for me because I am mostly writing toward what I don't know. And I think, but really feel preoccupied by, like badly need to know. I was walking down the street once with some Indian filmmakers, and we were talking about a Jhumpa Lahiri book. We were talking about The Namesake, and it's a novel that has, half of it is sort of about this arranged marriage, this couple in India, and they emigrate to the States, and the other half of it is about the kid that grows up in the States. And I was really struck. They were very bored by the whole marriage plot. They were really interested in the kid who grew up in the States because they were from India. And I was not as engaged by the kid who grew up in the States because I was pretty familiar with that narrative, and I was totally taken by what was happening in the place where I wasn't. And I think that really tends to kind of guide me a lot. That idea of like, oh, what's going on over there that I don't get to experience, but I could try to imagine, I think is sort of where I start.
Did Grace Paley tell either of you guys anything else that you want to share that we might not?
She didn't exactly believe in plot.
Yeah.
She thought a story could be organized like a poem.
She also thought that activism was probably at least as important as writing, so I went to the protest today. That happened.
Jordan, how do you get your ideas?
I actually don't know.
A man in an elevator with no shoes.
They choose you?
I don't. I mean, it's always easy to, I think, make things up, and it's tempting to do that. It's tempting to do that. What she said sounded really good about two ideas coming up against each other, and I could immediately like identify that and like maybe that's what happens, But I truthfully don't know.
I started writing fiction during COVID. I had just finished my memoir, and my girlfriends were saying, isn't it time you started dating again? And I'm like, heaven forfend, men are such hard work, sorry, men. And then different people were saying to me, so where do you think people go if they don't go to heaven? And my answer was, I think you carry them with you always, and so on. Talk to them. And when I was thinking of a topic for the book, I suddenly went, what if instead of talking to them, the person that you'd lost suddenly showed up in your kitchen saying he was going to give you a hand to sort something out in your life. And that's how my first book started. I started writing the second because there was a great Meet Cute story at the Pequot Library. And so I started with that, and then I was boring myself writing it, and I thought, that's no good. At the same time, I was getting feedback that people liked the ghost in the first book. So I put one in the second book, and he more or less took over. So yes, that's how it evolved, and I've now got the idea for the third book, which is one of the characters in the same little town, so her story.
The Pequot Library is a good place for ghosts.
They don't have any ghosts there, so I gave them one.
So I assume that, did you want to talk about it?
Oh, yeah, sure. For someone that doesn't really like following the rules of genre, my brain does work like tvtropes.com. Are y'all familiar with the website? And so it usually begins that way. I'm like, I want to write, like a urban fantasy, or I want to write like a loop narrative, or, I want to write a spy thriller. And so it starts there, but my favorite things, and I feel like as a reader, I am a person that is very difficult to disappoint, because if you do something different in the genre that I'm reading in, I came to the book because it was this genre, I get really excited. I lean forward when it's doing something against what the genre expects, right? And so for me, it's always starting in that place where I'm kind of in a supermarket grabbing some tropes. And then I do something different with it. I just, I'm interested in it in some slant way, and I explore that slant thing. And I'm also just very interested in characters, right? So what you were talking about resonated with me about your books having many different character POVs. My most recent book has 12 POVs. And so I'm very interested in character and character relationship to each other. So like networks of people within a concept. And so that's where it comes from. It's just it starts with a very big idea, and then it gets very small, and then I kind of like meet in the middle.
Yeah, I am one of those people with 1,000 ideas. They're probably all not great, but they're there. It's a matter of finding the story inside those things. I mean, like you said, I love the idea of two ideas creating friction, and in that friction, there's the story. I mean, this Audition for the Fox started off as a 5,000-word conversation between my trickster fox and their newest recruit, and that's fun, but that ain't a story. That's not a story. That's a little scene and it's fun, but I needed actual time and space to have it build out into what it ended up becoming. And I find when something's moving towards becoming an actual story with plot and tension and stakes, the question I'm always asking myself, and I find that this is the question that helps it stick and become something else, is what is it that my protagonist really, really wants to do? And can they do it, or what happens if they can't? I think that the chance for failure is just as interesting as the chance for success. And it's really like, if the answer to that question is, then there's no story. But if there's actually like real meat on the bone, then that is sort of where I jump off and hope that, I'm with that character. I'm like, hey, I hope you can do this. I'm with you. I'm rooting for you. And they're like, well, I want to do it. I'm like, well, you might not, but let's see what happens. And then it kind of sprawls from there.
Along those lines, have any of you had an experience where you started a book and you found that there wasn't any meat on the bone, or that you didn't want to spend a couple years or however long it takes you to write a book with this person, and it just wasn't going to go the distance?
It's happened with stories, which is one reason that working the way I do is less fraught in a way, because I often I like to use a minor character from something that happened before to tell they become the center of the next story. They don't all do that, but a lot of the pieces do. So sometimes I think, oh, this person would be really fabulous, and then the first paragraph is great, and then the rest is just dying on the page. So I start again. I mean, it's not deeply traumatic. It's something that seems like part of the process for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've written many manuscripts that I haven't finished and so on. But one thing that has happened to me with both of my novels that I've published is that I've started writing a novel that I thought was one novel or saying a certain thing, and in reality, it ended up saying something much different. And there's this, he started as a literary critic named René Girard, who had this idea of literary or novelistic conversion. And he said that like what he saw and what he thought of as the great novelists, especially when he saw their drafts and so on, is that the first draft he thought was like a put-up job, that they're sort of like scapegoating some idea or someone, but then the novelists who can write something truly sort of worthwhile encounter the sort of self-justification in the first draft, and they're able to move through it. And what he uses the language, he says, you can describe the evil of the other from within. Once you can do that, then you're actually doing something sort of three-dimensional and interesting. And so for this novel, like I really thought that I was like, I'm gonna set out, I was reading like a lot of Nietzsche and sort of Hagakure. I was reading like a lot of different things. I'm like, I'm gonna write this defense of strength. Maybe there's this sort of like problem with the culture is doing X, Y, and Z, and maybe there's this sort of like, we need a vital response, And then I like write this draft, and then I like put it away for 6 months or 8 months, and then I read it, and I'm just like, this is the ugliest, most impossible to read, sort of like horrific, like, attempted self-justification I could ever even write. And then so I ended up having to like do many more years of work with the thing, and it ended up being like totally different.
Thank you. Along those lines, you said you were reading a lot. I'm interested in what you read, and specifically, what do you read when you're writing a book? Do you read in your genre? Do you specifically read outside your genre? For me, I write book club fiction that's from multiple points of view, and that's my favorite type of book to read as well. So I don't shy away from reading it ever, and I don't feel like I'm going to end up copying other authors, but maybe I do, and I just don't know it. So what do you read when you're writing? Or do you not read when you're writing?
Oh, no, I definitely. So I read, every time I sit down to write, I read a little bit. So, and I usually have like a set of things that I read just habitually. So like an example, like I have a favorite Alice Munro collection, and I will read that collection and then start from the beginning and read it again. I'm a huge fan of Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I tend to reread that just randomly in places and before I write, and it just kind of gets me in the space to write. And then I kind of pick like a collection of different books and stories or essays or whatever that feels like it's talking to the project that I'm working on in some way. And so I generally read outside my genre. I like creative nonfiction a lot, and so I read a lot of creative nonfiction despite the fact that I don't write creative nonfiction, and that tends to go into the fiction. I tend to, there's like a chapter in No Gods, No Monsters, the first book in the series, that's about how honeybees ventilate their nests, right? It's like a little essay inside of a fiction book, right? And so I get my inspiration from those, from looking in different directions. I really love short stories, and so my novels tend to feel sometimes very short story-like. And I really love TV, like TV as a medium, and so that's also a huge influence for the way that I write. And so yeah, I dabble, I would say.
I read Alice Munro too, so I'm kind of glad to hear that, especially since she's, her reputation is suffering.
Yeah, that was real rough for me.
Yeah, me too.
I mean,
when I was younger, I used to read poetry before I worked to sort of get me in the head of what's important and to get me away from the daily world in a certain way.
To get you thinking specifically about language?
No, it wasn't just about, the language I was okay with. I actually didn't need boosts on that. It was more the emotional emphasis in the poetry itself. What it was pointing to was helping me.
I read a lot in my genre and in around. I review a lot for Reactor.com and a few other places. So I kind of can't stop reading. If I'm assigned a book, I'm like, well, I can't just not read it because it has a sword in it. I have to like kind of, but I also love that. I love books that are out now in genre, short fiction, seeing what my contemporaries are up to and like what they're working on or newly released. I mean, it also kind of helps me stay in touch with the community that I've been a part of and want to keep building and keep bringing people into. So it's helpful to, like a rising tide lifts all ships sort of deal. So reading someone's new story and saying, hey, this was great, and thinking, not even, oh, how will this affect my work, but just to say, oh, I get to be in conversation with this person, even if it's on a molecular level, the fact that our work is all here at the same time, we're all working and speaking towards as many truths as we can. I'm also a big fan of podcasts. I constantly need some sort of stimulation, so whenever I'm dishes or driving or anything, I'm listening to a lot of D&D actual play podcasts too, so I get to have that narrative joy of collaborative storytelling and fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, so playing in those genres, but it's such a different medium through collaborative gameplay or random dice rolling or collaborative narrative world building. So it scratches that itch, but it's not anything I'm currently working in. So it's nice to have that and set it aside, and at least listening to that activates the part of my brain that is its own storyboarding. So it just kind of keeps the gears turning.
Right. It complements your writing in a way.
Yeah.
I tend to read a little aspirationally. So I teach writing, sometimes plausibly and sometimes as an imposter. So I think what that has given me, and hopefully what I'm able to tell the students, is other people have gone through this, whatever literary problem you're having. Like this has been encountered before, and you have a lot of ways to consult what they did. And so when I read a ton of Joan's work. I don't know if you all see that I am getting to sit right now next to Joan Silber, but here we are. So I read a lot of that because I too was sort of really interested in different points of view, and an editor was sort of pushing back at that a little bit, and I was saying things like, well, I don't know if you're familiar with Fools, but that's a book you should look at. I was looking, toward Grace Paley and not a ton of plot. It turns out that's a tricky formula for a novel. So I would think to myself, well, I need a maritime disaster of some kind, and then I would go read some Jim Shepard because he's great at that. So I was sort of looking for the things that I needed. I read a lot of Penelope Fitzgerald for compression and distillation, I think, of material so that it gets to be really powerful and interesting. But to your first question, I read hugely and expansively about Bombay and novels about Bombay for a really long time. And then there was a moment when I was writing when I stopped. I stopped doing that because I thought, you know what, this is too good. Rohinton Mystery is actually too good. And I'm gonna convince myself that I don't need to finish the book. I could just keep reading his. And at that point, I started reading travel literature because I thought to myself, I mean, nonfiction. I thought,
About India or about other places too?
Any place,
Okay.
any place at all. Because I think what I was looking for was some kind of authority. I mean, I think I was looking for that feeling that you could not be from a place, but still summon enough observation and attention and ideas to write about the place. And so when I was concerned about that difficulty, I would read Pico Iyer and think, this guy just landed here. Like, what's he got to say? And usually something amazing. I mean, I'm a huge Pico Iyer fan. So I was reading toward what I thought I needed next.
I don't read like as I'm. There's this. I think one of the things that really actually broke writing open for me was sort of embracing this idea that actually the whole process is imitative. That, the way that you learn language is imitative. And I think for a long time, especially when I was younger, I was like bizarrely obsessed with trying to write something new or my own or something like that. I was like 17 and I'm like, I'm gonna like write something new. But it really wasn't until I started consciously adopting models. And so like for this last book, it was, Henry James, Shirley Jackson, a handful of others. That I really started looking at their sentences. Okay, how are these sentences moving? How are they working? Why is Henry James using 1,000 commas? What does this have to do? What is the sort of experience of reading something like this? And then how can I, repurpose it? That really, I feel like I started learning how to write. And then the other funny thing is that, it's like you read all this stuff and you think you're imitating these people, and then no one ever mentions, no one's ever been like, this reminds me of Henry James. You know what I mean? So I don't even know. It's like I couldn't even do that if I tried, I guess. And then for this one, I was reading like a lot of bodybuilding memoirs. In particular, there's this one bodybuilder, Mike Menser, who was obsessed with Ayn Rand. And he thought that the way he posed, his physique, the way his biceps like curved and stuff were like it was like the physical embodiment of Ayn Rand's philosophy. And so his bodybuilding books are this like strange mix of, like practical, sort of like mechanical, physiological, movement-based things, and then like some strange version of Ayn Rand's philosophy. It really was like, but in any case, so I read him, I read Arnold Schwarzenegger and all this stuff, and literally none of that made it into the novel. I read all sorts of things like that, and then like slowly and painfully all of that stuff got taken out, because it was just me like adding in all this like weird stuff that I learned that had, that didn't fit.
But it informed your writing. Or not.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It was super fun to get into, but I don't know. I actually just wrote an essay for the Paris Review about how I've never read Ayn Rand. So I'm not sure.
Did you tell us what you read?
Well, I read a lot. I always have one ebook, one paper book, and one audiobook on the go. Because I'm a person like Martin here who has to have something going on in her brain or I bore myself. So I read for language mainly, because I also read books that other people have written and asked me to review for them. And sometimes it happens that it's not quite my cup of tea. Sometimes it happens that they're really good writers and I go, oh yeah, this is great. I love the way this person writes and I love the way that they've used these metaphors and so on. Other times I go, I'm not a half bad writer because I'm better than this guy, sorry. So, it could be Charles Dickens. It could be Sharon Kurtzman.
These are the ones you think you're better than?
No.
Oh, okay.
Charles Dickens.
Okay.
No, but Charles Dickens, not just for the language, but for the way he managed to write installments and come up with a coherent sort of plot, and his characters. You know, that his characters are memorable, and that's something that every writer would like to have, memorable characters. So yeah, I'm very eclectic, and if it's lying around and it's got pages, I'll pick it up.
Nice, I love that. Okay, we have a few minutes left, so let's talk a little bit about writing process, because I think I'm interested, and I think other people are interested in how the sausage is made. So tell us something interesting about your writing process, like, do you have to write a certain number of words? Do you have to have a certain beverage? Does it have to be at a certain coffee shop? Or, or are there superstitions around your writing session? Or, something that's not like, people might not expect.
I am atypical in that I work in the afternoon.
The microphone.
Oh, sorry. I work in the afternoon, which is unusual. The sort of norm is I get up in the morning and I work, and I don't do that. I work between lunch and dinner. But at this point in my life, people know, well, the phone doesn't ring now, it's a little bit different, but people know that I'm not available to them in the afternoon, which is sort of helpful. And I have my own sort of, I've been doing it longer than anybody here because I'm older, but I'm not as easily alarmed when it's not going well. I mean, that's one of the great things. So if I have a bad day, it's not so bad. I mean, I can have bad weeks and bad months, but I'm used to the bumps of that. That's very helpful, I think.
Okay, yeah, so I would say the one thing that I do that I guess is like a writing practice thing is I set myself a minimum. So I do have a word count, but it's very low. It's 250 words a day.
I like that word count.
Right? Good. And I like that because it is easy. It's easy to do. Yeah. It's easy to cheat up. So I can write 300 easy or 400 easier, and I feel very accomplished if I get to 500. I'm like, that's twice my minimum, right? And so it's very encouraging for me. I used to have really high word counts, and I would always fail, and I used to punish myself. I used to add word counts and all that stuff. I just have a minimum now, and that has been really great. And if you miss a day, I don't try to make that up by adding it to the next day. I just 250 words is gonna work itself out over a year of a project anyway, right? And so that has been really helpful. I wanna say, because so much of what y'all were talking about with close reading is so much of a part of my process, I do start with close reading. And I would say that the reason, because I don't wanna say any shade to genre, because I love genre. I love sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and all that stuff. And I recognize that I was saying, I read outside of my genre when I write, but that's because I'm kind of looking for and learning from craft stuff, and being outside of the genre allows me to see the craft stuff better. When I'm shopping, I read for fun, I read genre for fun, but when I'm shopping for certain things, then I read specific genre things. Other writers are really great at action scenes, for example, and I read a ton of action scenes from a ton of different books I like to just learn the craft of that specific thing. But if I'm looking at general craft, I read outside of my genre so I can see it better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I do the New York Times spelling bee, and I've done it a long time now. I'm getting really good at it. I'm usually a genius really early in the day. And at that point, I think to myself, oh God, if you're such a genius, why haven't you written anything? And so then I can begin thinking, well, I mean, this is gonna go well. Here I am. And it goes badly.
Did you know, we were just with a friend of ours who said that there is something beyond genius?
Yeah, I'm a queen bee sometimes.
You've got that?
If
Okay,
I'm a
all
queen
right.
bee,
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's hard, and you got to put some time into it, and I don't have that kind of time because I didn't have a book. So there's that window between genius and queen bee that I'm really trying to work so that I could get something done. But usually, what happens is I discover within about 10 minutes, I am not a genius. This is a construct of the times. And what ends up working for me really well, actually, is at the end of the day, when all hope is lost and everybody else has gone to bed, and even my West Coast friends are going to be unavailable, and my kids need nothing more from me that day, at that point, late at night, I can start working and actually get something done. And it seems to be about nobody else expecting anything else from me at all. Or that maybe it's a little bit freer. It's 1 a.m. Who cares? Who cares? Nobody's going to read it anyway. They're all asleep. And so that's kind of, it's not what you'd call a psychologically healthy process, but it's
You're thinking that? You're like, they're all asleep like that? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, there's nobody out there. It's dark, yeah.
That's great. Did you want to tell us a secret about your writing process?
Oh, sure. Most of my writing process for the last decade has been a half hour at lunch, 20 minutes in the morning, the commute in, the commute out, an hour at night when my wife is asleep, like just stolen bits of time because I was working a 9-to-5 job and I also do freelance, which that is just like, if you got deadlines, I know that there's that Douglas Adams quote of the sound of loving deadlines rushing by. You know who doesn't like that quote? Editors who pay you. And so when it's freelance time, you just got to do it. But creative-wise, it's just been a lot of stolen moments on top of everything else. But recently, I just started my MFA program at Manhattanville. I'm going to be getting a degree in fiction through the education track so I can teach creative writing. Fun fact, one of my professors is here and is on the next panel, so you should see Sharbury next at 3 p.m. But that is something I'm incredibly grateful for because as my director of the program, Ian Haley Pollock, who's an incredible poet and teacher, he was like, you at least every week will have time to dedicate to the thinking of this. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't write a ton, you will at least have time where the thinking of it and the living of it is your job. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's my job. And he was like, yes, now go to work. Yeah.
That's excellent, thank you. Gabi?
So I always tell my writing peeps, because I run a couple of writing groups, is write badly and aim low. And that's what I do myself. What I discovered about myself was 2 things. One, when I'm writing memoir or emotional scenes, I write much better when I write by hand. And that's, I think, because your brain has time to connect with your hand. It's not like, and I'm a terrible typist anyway, so I'm always going, oh God, all those typos. So that I find helpful. The other thing is that one of the groups that I run is what they call a write-in on Monday mornings on Zoom. And people join, they sit, we write for 90 minutes silently. And I had no idea why this works, but it definitely works. Books happen, stuff gets published. And my son, who is on the highly functional end of the spectrum, told me that it is a known thing, that people with ADHD work better in silence with other people around.
Body doubling, yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
There's also guilt also.
Yep.
Like everyone else is sitting there, so you have to sit there too.
Well, yeah, and I'm leading the darn thing, so I should have something to show for it. So yeah, but that's very helpful to me to have something on my calendar that says you're writing for 90 minutes, and I've got a few of those every week. Not that I lead, but I join other people's, and it's almost like you've got a deadline, and also it's not too much of a stretch. If I really can't do it, I'll just say to myself, 15 minutes, and then I'll exceed it. Because there's something, that stops you writing when you know you need to. You have it in your life too, I'm sure. Anyway.
Thank you. All right, I think we have to wrap up, but all of the authors will be in the room behind signing books afterwards. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.